of us, the world is changing at a great pace. Innovation is constantly bringing out new technologies that we can apply and use for our organizations. But ultimately, we don't really know what the next 5 or 10 years will look like. It will probably look completely different to this. Now, it's clear that organizations are using a mix of all of these different types of technologies, but it's also clear that each requires a different approach in order to be able to use it effectively, but also how you can manage it and how you can optimize the use of those technologies. Now, clearly, cloud has become mainstream. Flexera release a number of states of cloud reports every year based on our right-scale acquisition. Over many years, we've seen a number of trends of adoption and increasing adoption into the cloud, driven by things like agility, speed to market, being able to be more responsive to customers, all of these types of things that are going to be discussed, I'm sure, at great length over these 2 days. But ultimately, this is also true that if you look at SAM teams and ITAM teams, in terms of the old world, it's not going away. So public cloud, SaaS, private hybrid cloud are obviously an increased focus of these departments. But if you look at data center software, desktop software, then actually they are decreasing somewhat, but their focus is still fundamentally increasing. And that's because organizations need to use a mix of these different technologies in order to deliver some of the outcomes that they want for their customers, but also internally to be able to support their staff. So this mix drives a very complicated picture within an organization where there are multiple different departments and parts of the organization all wanting to be able to collaborate, all having their own particular interest in technology, and being able to connect the dots between them can become very difficult in the more historic kind of on-prem type world, but it adds further layers of complexity when you're looking at cloud technologies. Establishing that common language is really a cornerstone of any type of FinOps lifecycle, is to be able to make sure that the organization talks the same language. If you're talking to architects or operations or security, that they're talking about technology and the services in the same way. They understand what they are, they understand how they're being used in the organization. And being able to get that view can be very challenging for organizations. So Flexera help organizations to be able to adopt that common language of various different technologies so that they can understand how they're being used, who's using them, and why they're using them in the organization. I just want you to take a moment just to look at the screen, have a little think about that symbol, see what you think. If I move on, clearly it's a matter of context. It's the same symbol, but you put letters next to it, it becomes ABC. You put numbers next to it, it becomes 12, 13, 14. And that's illustrating an important concept in the field of psychology called perception and bottom-up and top-down processing. Our brains are importing vast quantities of data, sensory information on a second-by-second basis. So sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste. We respond to that sometimes. If you touch something hot, you know about it, you move away from it very quickly, and it can be instinctive. But the vast majority of our perception is based on a top-down processing of that sensory information to be able to start understanding the context, being able to understand the impact to us, but also applying what we've learned previously. And that learning process is very important to be able to make sure that you can make the right decisions. Now, any organization, I'm sure, is going to be telling you that they're a data company. I think we all are. It's nothing new. But what's important, it's not just about importing that data. It's about what you can do to it that's important. So Flexera have a set of solutions which will help organizations understand the technology that are used in their organization. So being able to import agentless, agent-based technologies, being able to import third parties, connecting using APIs to SaaS vendors, to cloud vendors, being able to import entitlements and license information. There's huge amounts of data that we can be importing and processing. But in order to make sense of that, you need an identification engine. And we have Technopedia at the core of our solution to be able to do that. So this has millions of products within it. It has millions of mapping rules and identification rules to be able to definitively identify those assets. And it's only by identifying the assets across data centers, SaaS and cloud, that then we can start applying our libraries of information that can help organizations understand things like obsolescence or vulnerabilities. It can help organizations understand cloud cost pricing, be able to understand how 3 or 4 different cloud vendors' bills can be normalized and standardized together. So that cleaning and enriching process is very important to any type of project now. Any BI AI tool needs to have clean data in order to run effectively, and it's no different from technology data. And Flexera will do that cleaning and enriching process based upon our experience and our libraries of information to be able to help identify the assets that are used in the organization. So we can help provide visibility across the estate so that you can understand what you've got, where it's vulnerable, where it's obsolete, where open source is used, for example. We have use cases around IT asset management to help organizations look at managing software licenses, SaaS licenses, hardware more effectively, being able to optimize and save either cost avoidance or hard dollar savings in terms of those particular licenses used in the organization. But what I'm going to primarily focus on today with a live demonstration is our cloud management capabilities. And that's split into 2 areas. One, how can I migrate? How can I identify workloads to be able to modernize my estate? And then also, once you're in the cloud, as we know most of us are, how can you then start to optimize? Because if you may go through a lift and shift, it may be the best way to quickly migrate. You may have challenging reasons around removing a data center. But ultimately, if you don't optimize when you are in the cloud, it's going to end up becoming more expensive for you. So we have a number of these different capabilities built up from market leading solutions in each of these areas. And we also have a solution that can bring this information together to be able to help organizations connect the dots. So one example of being able to connect the dots is within our platform Flexera One. We have the ability, so if I just refresh my screen, it's going to log me out. We have the ability to be able to bring together a number of different data sets about someone's organizational estate. So being able to import that information from multiple sources to be able to cover spend in terms of what's my on-premise spend, what's my SaaS spend, what's my cloud spend. We're using a number of sensory type imports to be able to import that data into our solution. And then we're using our top-down processing to be able to identify these assets and to be able to start providing what in this instance looks like very high-level information about cost, about trends, about the composition of our technology spend across all of these different technologies. But it's based on that ground-up data collection. So it's based on fact. This is the cost because it's based upon either connecting to the cloud and looking at the bill directly, or it's based upon the contracts and licenses that we have purchased in terms of on-prem. So we can give executives a very clear view of that spend composition, and we can also give them a way of navigating that spend in terms of understanding their mix from we want to move to cloud more. We need to know where we can start reharvesting, maybe existing licenses, reclamation in terms of SaaS software to be able to put more money into the areas that we want to invest more. We know budgets are typically going down 47% in one of our surveys due to the pandemic. People's budgets are going down. And so people need to be able to do more with less. And this is one way of being able to start understanding that portfolio mix in terms of what you're spending. We also know, in terms of helping organizations maximize the value of some of their contracts, they need to have detailed information from particular vendors. In this instance, we're looking at Microsoft, and it's specifically looking at all of the services that we procure from Microsoft. That's a good example because with Microsoft, we've got things like Office 365 that could be deployed in desktop, it could be deployed in SaaS. We have Azure, we also have SQL Server and other elements to an enterprise agreement. And so being able to bring all of those elements together is helping organizations make the best decisions come negotiation time, come when the time for renewal. And that's one example where we're going to be enhancing more and more these types of reports to be able to add aspects such as extended support, being able to understand where we can save money in those particular areas and maybe shift that to the cloud, where we can look at technical debt, where we can start looking at life cycle obsolescence, where we can start looking at vulnerabilities to be able to start using this information come negotiation time to start pushing back on our vendors to make sure that they're providing the tools that we need and the ones that are providing value and the ones that are secure and safe, but also ones that we're paying an appropriate price for. So that's an example of looking at someone's technology portfolio holistically and across the environment. I'm going to take you into looking at how we can start to define some type of a cloud migration. Now, we have an agentless discovery capability, which will essentially deploy an appliance into an environment. We then use that appliance to be able to input some subnets, and the tool will go out and find anything that is connected to that particular network. So very importantly, it's ground up, it's getting everything. We don't have to point it in the right direction. Once it started to collect information on that estate, we then go to an inventory and a performance stage. So we do need to put some credentials in. It stays on the appliance encrypted at rest. It doesn't come up into any of our clouds. And then that allows us to be able to log into some of the machines to be able to start taking a full inventory of the system in terms of CPU and memory, but also being able to start looking at running processes, being able to start looking at installed applications that are on these particular machines, being able to start looking at the network connections and what it's communicating to. So this is really a very basic data collection capability, but it's one that's very important and necessary. And it's collecting a huge amount of data as we go through this particular process. What we want to do, though, is to be able to use our brain and to be able to apply some logic so that we can turn this into information. Now, typically, these types of tools will start to look at workloads. We'll start to look at workloads from a dependency matrix type of view. These are all of the connections to other different servers and processes and things that this particular workload has. We can understand the NetStack connections, destination sources, and so on. And there's as I say, a huge amount of data that's being collected at this time to be able to undertake this, but it's not usable. And so in order to make this usable, we have some patented algorithms which will help to group up common workloads delivering a particular application stack or business service. So for example, the tool will firstly go through creating service groups, things that are highly communicative on a network, such as WSUS, a mid server, network devices, Active Directory, and so on. It will then isolate those particular workloads so that we can uncover other interactions between different services, different servers. And what it will do is it will create these auto app groups, which then a user can go in and actually understand what that's delivering to the organization. So going into a little more detail, for example, Auto App 1 is 2 servers, Auto App 2 is 2 servers, Auto App 3 is 4 or 5 different servers, And the tool has done to this point automatically. There's been nothing for the user to do. The data collection has happened. We've understood those assets. We're looking at the dependencies between them, but then we're applying our algorithm to be able to start isolating those into particular application groupings. At this point, a user would go in and start to define, say, for example, this is our CRM system. I know that because of some of the servers that are the hosts within it. It's at this point that then the tool will start to allow me to understand if this is potentially a candidate for migration. Now, the grouping itself is brilliant because it allows us to have a logical grouping of things that are potentially easier to migrate. So maybe we want to work our migration muscle. We want to start working on lower impact, non-customer facing workloads first, so that we understand the process. We might be doing this ourselves. We might be doing it with partners. But understanding that process from identifying workloads, driving it through migration processes to be able to start understanding all of the things with this cloud and security and deployment and so on, to be able to get that workload migrated. And so it can help win that prioritization process to be able to isolate certain workloads that are good candidates for migrating. It will also tell me information such as the performance rating. It will give me a view as to whether that performance is based on the inventory or whether we're based on right sizing. Flexera is enriching this information with cost information so that we can start to build up scenarios to be able to say, maybe we're looking at AWS East and Azure East. I want to be able to start looking at the matched machine instances, cost, performance profiles. I want to identify zombie servers and remove those before we start migrating them. The tool will also allow me to start doing optimization scorecards to be able to understand, given maybe I've got different starting points for migration, then I might want to look at migrating as quickly as possible. I might want to start looking at low cost. I might want to start looking at refactoring everything and being as optimized as possible. And the tool can allow me to do that. So I've shown you a couple of examples here of how we can help cloud migration in terms of grouping certain assets. And then I'm going to move into show you where we can start looking at, once we've migrated into a cloud, how can we start looking at various different costs within those particular clouds. Now, we have a number of different dashboards that are available here for Azure, AWS, Google, as you would expect. We also have the ability to import information based upon, say, a cloud in China, or maybe an on-prem data center. We have a common bill ingest feature, which can automate a process of bringing any bill into the solution. Those bills can be viewed across a range of dimensions in the bill against tags, but also against rule-based dimensions that we apply. We can apply markup and markdown. And so all of these types of things that we want to do in an informed stage of FinOps is to be able to start getting visibility of that particular bill. We know organizations need to be able to start looking at defining showback and chargeback as part of that informed phase. And so we provide an interface that will allow me to group my cloud spend against different logical groupings. This could be based upon department down to, or divisional department down to cost center viewpoints. More recently, though, we're seeing organizations adopt more of a product-centric view. One good example is Flexera with our SaaS-based solutions. We use our own tooling to be able to define a tile for each of our products, and we're able to understand for both site reliability, for hosting, for development, what are our cloud costs for each of those particular solutions. So this works by ultimately not leaving any dollar left behind. So there isn't an allocated amount. There's a set of allocation rules that we put in to be able to start sifting through the bill and putting particular parts into particular buckets. And so that could be based upon cloud account. It could be based upon tags. It could also be based upon looking at some type of shared cost or certain ratio of a shared cost into each of these different buckets. Once we've applied it to one of those buckets, then we can have logins to the tool so that particular users are able to view the bill relevant to themselves. Very commonly, service owners will have their own login to the tool to be able to see this is the cost for my particular service or my particular product, and they can understand and slice and dice that data using the existing dashboards. They can create their own. They can use tabular views to be able to start looking at the information based upon cloud vendor category. Maybe I might want to look at a particular service, for example. And all of this information is very flexible to be able to start understanding each of those different services, identifying trends within the bill, and also being able to do things like showing the usage metrics. So very important in that inform phase is obviously how you communicate that common language. And it's one way that we can start to apply a metric rather than going to someone and saying you're consuming, X thousands of pounds for your cloud bill, being able to tell them it's this particular service and it's this particular metric, such as you're using so many terabytes, you're using so many processing units. The tool, as you move towards looking at optimize and operate phases of FinOps, the tool has a number of different recommendations out of the box. So being able to help you with optimize in terms of right sizing. So looking at different VMs, database paths, storage, being able to look at lights on, lights off policies, being able to look at zombie infrastructure type stuff, such as unattached volumes or unattached public IP addresses. And the tool will go through a number of recommendations, giving you specific details about those particular services, about particular costs related to them. Where we take this a few steps further than other organizations is that we have real automation to be able to start driving some of that operate phase. And the automation allows me to do almost whatever I want with the estate. The tool comes with over 140 different policies, predefined, all available in a GitHub repo. And these cover things like compliance, cost, operational, security aspects. We can also work with SaaS management tools to be able to start reclaiming licenses and these types of activities. The catalog itself is based upon reusable policies covering all of the main providers. So people like Google are well dealt with in terms of being able to look at unutilized IP addresses, unused volumes, object storage optimization, and so on. But the catalog itself covers a range of different types of things that I may want to be concerned with, such as untagged resources, bill alerts, and forecasts, being able to start looking at particular policies, disallowed regions, but also being able to use things like Microsoft Azure Hybrid Use Benefit for SQL, for Linux machines, for Windows servers, for example. And the tool will go through and ultimately run a policy, and it doesn't matter, I can open up, say, unattached policy, unattached volumes. The tool will go through and you can select a schedule for how often you want this policy to run. You can select the accounts that you want it to work on, and you can also tell it some automated actions in terms of final snapshots or deleting volumes. Now that automation and that action can be configured in whichever way you need it to happen. And ultimately, these are all built upon a particular script. So these are reusable, and there is a policy as code approach. It allows me to firstly connect via an API to another system, build out a data store, then do some analysis on that data store, and then due to the outcome, either take a certain piece of action or deliver a piece of information for a particular user. And so what this can do is help us to address a wide range of different use cases. Now, there's obviously a focus from organizations around very common, PaaS services and IaaS resources and things in terms of how they want to right size and optimize. But there will be very specific services that your organizations use, which you want to do particular checks on. And so this can be provided very simply, changing the policy to be able to look at the particular service that you want to. One example, we use a set of RDS instances, and we have a particular way that they're set up and the particular way that we manage the cost of them. So we're able to implement that business logic into how we want this managed, so that we can put the guardrails in, so that we can identify issues moving forward. And that's something that our FinOps organization does. Another example, perhaps, would be using these types of policies to look at things like unit economics, because we can gather the data, we can start to interpret it, and then we can deliver that data in a number of different ways. So everyone has a different view of that nirvana of unit economics. How do you want to split down your use of technology into the products or services, business lines that you provide? But the tool can allow you to have your very specific view on that data and have automation in terms of delivering that. So that's a quick overview of Flexera's solution in terms of cloud migration and in terms of cloud cost management. I'd like to just bring the presentation to a close. Thank you for all joining. I'm going to try and stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions that have come through, or if anyone can tell me if there are any questions, then I would be very happy to help answer them for you. Okay, so there's no questions I can see at the moment. We do have the option for people to join me to ask their own questions after the presentation. So I'll put into the chat window that link. So if anyone would like to follow, then I will be around for the next sort of 20, 30 minutes or so. I'm very happy to answer your questions in that environment. But thank you very much for your time, everyone. I hope you really enjoy the rest of the conference. It's been really good to join. Take care and thank you very much. Bye-bye.